Okay, then I suggest we get started, right?
Okay.
With Mandy's opening comments.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the official launch of the first AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN. It's our great pleasure to have so many of you joining this launch webinar today. And in the coming hour, we hope to answer all of your questions about the AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN and rankings in general. For those of you not familiar with AppliedHE, we were founded in 2020 in Singapore with a mission to better serve the part of the higher education sector that's not highly research intensive. So your TVETs, your polytechnics, your colleges, and in many cases, also private universities. The importance of private universities in ASEAN and in fact, in many other emerging economies cannot be overstated. They are often the institutions who are most innovative, achieve high graduate employment, and often raise the bar in terms of standards and rigor by partnering more willingly with international universities. In many countries, including in Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines, private universities enroll more students than their public sector counterparts, and the sector has thus played a huge role in increasing access to higher education. In some cases, private higher education has become a services export industry. So today is as much about launching a new ranking as it is about celebrating the achievements of private higher education. Within ASEAN, we see time and time again that people-to-people exchanges, tourism, trade, businesses, education, etc., generally lead the way in bringing this region closer together. It is the private sector, sometimes facilitated by government, that is bringing the region together, whether it's budget airlines or television or the various super apps. Now with an ASEAN ranking, I believe we can really start a conversation about ASEAN higher education and see ASEAN as a globally competitive higher education destination that can compete with Europe and or North America. This is especially true for students from ASEAN themselves. Why travel halfway across the world for higher education and cultural immersion when our neighboring countries have high quality universities and a rich culture for you to explore? I strongly believe in the positive effects of internationalization, and I think within ASEAN, we can do so much more to internationalize student flows and connect universities to each other. The ASEAN ranking is, in this regard, a starting point, not so much to see who is number 1 or number 2 or 3, etc., but it's a list of confident, ambitious, forward-looking, and internationally minded universities that have stepped up to have themselves ranked and in the process have showcased themselves to the world. Congratulations to all ranked universities on your great achievements, and thank you for putting your trust in us.
All right. Thank you very much, Mandy. Now it's my turn to present, and I will present a little bit about the ranking methodology and the results. And after that, I believe panelists will make some small comments, and then the floor opens to you, the participants, to ask anything you want or to make any comments you would like to make. Now, I believe you can see my screen now, AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN. So I'll just take it away. Okay, what will I talk about this afternoon? Number one, a little bit about the relationship between AppliedHE and rankings. Who is AppliedHE? Why are we doing ranking? The second question I'd like to answer is essentially, why do we need a private university ranking? All right, why not an all university ranking? I'll talk a bit about the ranking methodology, including the data sources and procedures, and I'll also mention our kind of policy on data transparency and data sharing, because although it is in some ways a technicality, I think it's an important shift that we're trying to make in doing that and following that. I'll obviously also talk about the ranking results, right? Because that's the exciting part for the ASEAN top 10 and for the participating countries, and also a little bit about the sub-rankings. Now, I'm not an expert in every single university, so I'll just try and give some very general context, and perhaps some of the members in the audience can give us more context or have more comments, or the panelists as well, of course, and then just some closing comments for you. Now, AppliedHE, as Mandy mentioned, was founded in 2022 by veterans from the QS Asia office in Singapore. And of course, QS is well known for rankings, so we have a lot of experience in that area. We launched the AppliedHE Rankometer World University Rankings, which was a kind of combination ranking or mixed ranking of different existing rankings, covering the top 500 universities worldwide in 2021. So in a way, that was a dry run for the ranking that we're presenting today. We also produce a range of higher education ratings. We've got an AppliedHE English Ready rating, which is for evaluating English as a medium of instruction programs, or EMI. We've got the Online Ready rating, which is for online taught programs, which have, of course, hugely taken off since COVID. And we've got the Job Ready rating, which is still in pilot, but should be fixed this year, which focuses on learning, employability, and institutional capacity. Yeah, and also it's a fairly big kind of flagship rating product. So there's a quality assessment framework there, there is a stakeholder perception index there, and there's even sustainable development goal benchmarking. So it's a very comprehensive one. So that's simply put, that's our kind of track record where we're coming from. Now, this ranking is produced with the oversight of the Ranking Advisory Board, the chair of whom is Dr. Kevin Downing from the City University of Hong Kong, who is also moderating this session. And as you've probably already noticed, Mrs. Winnie Ely from Hong Kong, Professor Dr. Shamim Rafiq Galea from Malaysia, and Dr. Richard Holmes, also from Malaysia, they are on the Ranking Advisory Board and also on today's panel. And as chair, essentially, Dr. Kevin Downing, he kind of guides the process. He's our traffic manager, if you want to call it that. The role of the Ranking Advisory Board is to provide feedback and advice on the ranking methodology and data collection. Now, very importantly, the Ranking Advisory Board does not directly influence the ranking. Yes, they have input on methodology and data use, but not on the outcomes. And the aims for us is to have diversity. So to have people from the public universities, the private universities, international, non-academics, etc. And it's fully independent of AppliedHE. So we do not always follow exactly what the Ranking Advisory Board wants to do, and vice versa. Now, why do we want to have a private university ranking for ASEAN? What is the gap that we're trying to fill? Well, first of all, we want to highlight the strength of private universities. And as you'll see in a moment, the focus of this ranking is on the quality of teaching and learning, on employability, and also on research, community engagement, internationalization, and institutional reputation. But those first two are really the main focus of the ranking. And those are also often the main goals that private universities set themselves. We want to increase visibility of the ASEAN universities. We've calculated that there are approximately 800 of them, but only a fraction actually appears in any international ranking. So it's a hugely underserved segment of the higher education sector. And we want to offer an alternative to research-intensive rankings like your QS, your THE, your Shanghai ranking, which heavily reflect research performance, which are often a poor fit for private universities that do limited research. And while something like Webometrics, for instance, is an international ranking, but it really looks at the website of an institution. So basically, many good institutions are underserved by current rankings, and hence our attempt to do this. Now, what is the geographic scope of the ranking? Actually, it covers 6 countries at the moment: Cambodia, Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. Now, we have found no accredited private universities awarding local degrees in Brunei, Laos, and Singapore. Now, some of you may say, yes, but there are foreign branch campuses in Singapore, such as James Cook University, but they actually don't award a local degree. And similarly, there are foreign branch campuses, a lot in Malaysia as well, now coming into Indonesia, but they don't award local degrees. So that's an important distinction that we've made. And we also tried to include Myanmar, but we had no response or interest from any institution there. Of course, Myanmar is going through a difficult time, so that's not completely surprising. Then the ranking methodology. I'll talk basically about two things, which is the criteria and weightings, answering questions, well, what should we include and what should be emphasized? And also about the data selection. So what data is available for all ASEAN countries? Is it credible, and how can we access or acquire the data? Now, starting with the criteria, we look at, as I mentioned already, teaching and learning for 40%, and then employability and research for 15% each. Now, that already covers 70% of the ranking, right? So clearly this is our focus. Why? Because we believe those are the areas that private universities aim to excel in and what they're well known for. We also look at community outreach, at internationalization, and at institutional reputation. These are important as well, but of course they're not necessarily the core focus. And we include them because we believe they can help us construct a healthy, broad-based comparison. Now, this is the graphical representation. It's maybe a little bit small on your screen, but again, teaching and learning 40%, employability 15%, research 15%, and then the other criteria. Now, for data, we draw data from three main sources. We conduct online surveys of students, and in some cases also alumni. If the institution doesn't have an alumni tracer study, I'll get into that in a second. But for every university, we conduct a student survey. We look at bibliometrics from Google Scholar, which is scientific papers, and also Google News. We look at university impact in the media. And we look at institutional data, which we verify based on documentary evidence and an interval sampling audit. So a number of universities that submitted data to us, they've had a discussion with us where we asked them to clarify some of the data, answer some more questions to make sure that the data that we've received is accurate. And this is not so much the concern that is a university cheating, but sometimes it's also unclear what data to submit, how to submit it. So that's the reason for it. Then the data sources, as you can see from the graphic here on the right, the student survey is about 49%. So that is by far the heaviest weightage that you see. Now, the indicators, to really dig deep, and I'll try and go through this a bit fast. Teaching and learning as an indicator is essentially measured based on the student faction with teaching, with facilities, and with examinations, and it's based on our own surveys. Employability looks at self-employment and normal employment and further study as both a share of the graduating class and as a share of the total respondents. So if universities had trouble getting a lot of responses to their alumni surveys, they were penalized. Now, very often institutions have just handed us an alumni tracer study. And in countries like, I believe, Malaysia and also Indonesia, this is increasingly mandatory. Universities need to submit an alumni tracer study every year to the government. So these studies are available. They're very thorough. They're multi-page documents, or we get some spreadsheets as well. So that's very solid research about graduate outcomes, which we have. Now, if a university did not have that, we gave them an alumni survey from AppliedHE to run, which asked some very elementary questions. Essentially, graduates, did you get a job, or were you doing further study after graduation? For research, we use data from Google Scholar. Now, Google Scholar is by far the largest single database of scientific publications. It also covers many more languages. It's not just in English. So we thought it was very suitable. Now, we looked at the number of Google Scholar profiles with at least one publication during the past 5 years. We looked at the number of publications per faculty for the last 5 years, and at the number of citations per paper. Now, I think especially the first one is also a measure of how many members of the faculty body are actually involved in doing some kind of research. because if you have a lot of faculty who don't do research and you have some who do a lot of research, that's also not a healthy situation. So universities where many faculty members are involved in some form of research, they gain some more points. Now, of course, number of publications per faculty and citations per papers is an indicator that you've probably seen elsewhere. Now, the other smaller criteria with lower weighting is community outreach, where we ask students reporting whether they have been involved in the past year in some kind of environmental or social outreach program, whether students receive support in terms of scholarships or grants, and also media attention, media mentions of the university in Google News. And again, Google News is a multilingual platform, so that includes local media mentions. For internationalization, we've looked at the student and faculty share classified as international. And our classification of international is a bit broader. It includes foreign degree holders of the faculty. So if your faculty studied abroad, we classify them as international. And also virtual exchange students that have received credit from your university during the past year. And this is mainly gained from institutional data. Then here's a typo. This shouldn't be institutional data, but institutional reputation. So we have a system of peer nomination. Every university that submits data can submit up to 10 institutions that they think are other good private universities in ASEAN, 5 domestic and 5 in other ASEAN countries. This is what they've done. Unfortunately, what we've realized is that not every university has submitted the institutional nominations, and we've had a lot of nominees of well-known universities who then decided not to submit any data to us. So all those votes were lost. So this is an indicator which I still think is interesting, and I'll share some results with you, but it's one which we need to, I think, improve further. Now, a word about transparency and data sharing. So our aim when we started this, partly to persuade universities to take part in the ranking, but I think also as what we hope will be a new best practice, is that we want to return data to the institution. We don't just want to say, okay, you give us data and then we determine your ranking and then bye-bye. We want to share with the institution the data they've collected. So every institution has been ranked has received a detailed ranking report showing exactly how they benchmark against their peers in each indicator, each subcategory, but it's anonymized. So they don't know exactly against who they benchmark, but they know how they fare against the anonymized peers. We also share the raw student survey results, which account for 40% of our ranking. Again, it's anonymized. You cannot see which student responded what, but you do get the survey results back from us. And also the raw Google Scholar data, which we've collected. Now, why do we do this? First of all, I think it's a way for us to establish transparency and credibility. For the biggest parts of a ranking, which the institution hasn't submitted themselves, we show them exactly what the data says. Also, kind of principle of data ownership, that they should own their own data. And we believe it can add value for participating universities. I mean, there's no need to hire a strategy consultant to do this research for you. Again, we've given you the raw data. You can be on your way and use it for your quality improvement processes. Right, now the exciting part, the ranking results. And of course, the ranking results have been on our website since this morning, so it's not a huge reveal, but nevertheless, it's very exciting. Ladies and gentlemen, we're very proud to present the top 10 ASEAN private universities for 2022. Leading here is Bina Nusantara University from Indonesia, then University Tenaga Nasional Malaysia, Universitas Islam Indonesia from Indonesia, University of Santo Tomas from the Philippines, Universities Telkom from Indonesia, University Muhammadiyah Malang from Indonesia, Kirk University from Thailand, Dui Tan University Vietnam, Segi University Malaysia, and closing Universities Technocrat Indonesia from Indonesia. And as you see from the total score, it's quite a close contest, right? Especially number 1 and 2. If you've been watching the Beijing Winter Olympics, it's almost a photo finish. So it shows that really the gap between the top universities is not huge, and it's a very competitive field of the institutions that have submitted data and what their outcomes are. Now, looking a little bit at country groups, we've had a few submissions from Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam, 3 from Thailand, 2 from Cambodia, 1 from Vietnam. And of course, the Thai we've had a Thai university in the top 10 and a Vietnamese university in the top 10. And so we hope that will be encouragement for more universities from those countries to submit for next year's edition. Then in Indonesia, we have a very strong showing with 7 universities. Several of these universities are also included in other rankings. So I think Indonesia, the institutions that agreed to submit were very, very strong. And that partly explains Indonesia's very strong performance. Now, I think in Malaysia, we've had a mix of universities, universities that are very well known, ranked, and also universities that are quite small. And it's nice to see that some of the smaller universities did very well as well. So if our ranking amplifies anything, perhaps smaller institutions, I think that's not a bad thing. But of course, also some of the big institutions perform strongly. Then in the Philippines, we have 8 universities represented. I think the biggest national delegation, if you can call it like that. Of course, University of Santo Tomas in top place and 4th overall. So a very strong performance. And again, not huge differences in the scores. So quite a competitive ranking altogether there. Now, the sub-ranking results are perhaps more telling of some institutions. Although, again, I don't know the details of every single university, but teaching and learning, the top 10, you see quite some changes. For instance, Bangkok Thonburi University doesn't rank in the top 10, but ranks number 7 for teaching and learning, which is, of course, a great achievement. And we see many Indonesian universities doing well in this area. For employability, we see Malaysian universities doing well, including Manipal International University. Now, just to clarify, Manipal International University, of course, is a well-known education brand from India, but their Malaysia campus awards a Malaysian degree. So this is why they're included in our ranking. And generally, Malaysian universities do quite well with employability, also perhaps because of the nature of the Malaysian labor market. Now, in the research top 10, we see many universities from Indonesia, and this was quite a surprise to us. And the reason for this is that Indonesia has a very dynamic Indonesian language academic publishing scene. It's well indexed by Google Scholar. Most universities run at least 1 or 2 journals in the Indonesian language where they accept papers and they cite each other. So the research output from Indonesian universities in the Indonesian language is quite large. So there's a large Indonesian language scientific communication going on, and that is reflected here in the strong performance of Indonesian universities. Then community engagement, you might notice University Kuala Lumpur from Malaysia being top. In some ways, if you know the institution, it's not a surprise. It's owned by a Malaysian government agency called MARA, which is specifically focused at the uplifting of the rural population of Malaysia. And so that their private universities is one of the most engaged in ASEAN is not really a surprise there. And congratulations, of course, on that. And then internationalization, we see Kirk University from Thailand doing very well. Also some of the Malaysian universities. So what we know from Kirk University, they're very strong in China. They have a lot of students and faculty from China. So obviously they perform very, very well in this area. Institutional reputation, well, of course, it's not surprising. The University of Santo Tomas is one of Asia's oldest universities. So obviously they have a strong institutional reputation, and that came out through our institutional reputation score as well. And generally some of the perhaps better known universities were favored by the institutional reputation score as it came out. And also, of course, the Cambodian University, University of Putri Sastra, coming in 8th place in this category. So clearly an institution that's well known in the region. Now, some closing comments before we hand over to the chair, who I'm sure also has some comments to make. First of all, the 2022 edition was challenging, to put it mildly. We had institutions dealing with COVID lockdowns, with students not having internet to complete our online survey. We had one institution who said that was a problem. They still managed a 60% response rate, so which is fantastic, like our hats off. In Malaysia, particularly, we had floods during our survey period. We had an unprecedented, I think, once in 50-year floods, also here in the KL area. I think the Philippines was hit by a typhoon during the area. And of course, there was the liability of newness. People didn't know who AppliedHE was. They didn't know the outcomes. So it was quite a challenge in that sense. Also, we were doing everything for the first time, so we were learning. But of course, we have high hopes for an expanded AppliedHE private university ranking ASEAN in 2023, and we want to deeply thank the pioneers, the 29 institutions who submitted their data and were ranked for stepping forward and basically saying, yes, this is a great idea, we support it. We're very happy that we shined light on new universities, and by that I mean universities that are not in the QS or the Times Higher Education Asian ranking, which is often referenced. So about 65% of what we've covered has not been covered in one of their rankings yet. So we are really making a contribution. Of course, 35% has, giving a new reference point. And I think in general, we've tried to raise the bar, and whether we have, of course, you will be the judge of that, but we've made a genuine attempt to measure teaching and learning. And we've done that through student surveys. That hasn't really been attempted before by anyone else, to really try and measure quality of teaching and learning. We've included new indicators about employability and community engagement. I think we're new there as well. And I think these are incredibly important indicators to have. We've had a slightly different approach to internationalization and institutional reputation. We think it's better, but of course, time will tell. And we've tried to take a big step in data transparency, which I hope adds to the credibility of our rankings. So I would like to leave it there and hand over to our fantastic panelists and the chair for their comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Mandy, and welcome to everybody. It's good to be here at the launch of the AppliedHE ASEAN Private University Ranking. I have to say, many of you who've spoken to me in the past will know that I've always had a bee in my bonnet that private universities are not allowed to compete on an equal playing field with publicly funded universities. And so I very much welcome this first set of results for the private university ranking. It's actually the first international university ranking that includes only private institutions of higher learning. And it focuses specifically for this edition for universities in ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and their member countries. Now, we all know, and I'm sure many of you who are listening know, that in many countries, higher education plays an absolutely pivotal role, not just complementing public and international higher education, but also providing a valid and important alternative in terms of sometimes what is offered in the curriculum and the nature of the learning experience. So before I go any further with getting this bee out of my bonnet, I'd like to introduce to you the three panelists that we have for this evening. The idea being, I think, Peter, that once the three panelists have had a chance to make a statement each, we can then throw this open to questions from our participants.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they can raise hand. There's a raise hand button in Zoom, and we may be able to bring them up if you call on them, or they can put their question in the chat.
Yeah, I'll leave that for you to manage because of some technical difficulties. I've actually logged in on my phone rather than my computer, so it'd be rather small if I was managing it. So you can open up and introduce each candidate, and that's going to answer questions, ask questions. So first and foremost, I'd like to introduce you to our distinguished panelists, all of whom are AppliedHE Ranking Advisory Board members. And they're all very experienced in the ranking field. First of all, I'd like to introduce Professor Dr. Shamim. Many of you will know Shamim exceptionally well. She's Professor of Applied Linguistics and TESOL at Segi University in Malaysia. So welcome, Shamim.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
And then I would like to introduce my colleague, Mrs. Winnie Ely, who's I think in Thailand at the moment. She's secretary to the governing board of the Dongguan City University of Hong Kong. Hi, Winnie.
Hi, Kevin. Hi, everyone.
Good to hear from you. And finally, Richard, who I've lost, and somehow I've lost Richard's details. But Richard Holmes, who's basically involved in monitoring the way rankings run for the whole of Malaysia. So Richard, welcome.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, is it? It's kind of evening here.
It's good morning for me, good afternoon to you, I believe.
Okay, right. First and foremost, I'm going to ask each member of the panel in turn to comment on what they think are the strengths of the new applied higher education ASEAN private ranking system. So I'm going to go to Shameen first and say, Shameen, could you just outline a few sentences what you think are the key strengths of this new ranking, please?
Thank you very much, Kevin. Okay, for me, I think one of the most exciting feature of this ranking would be how we look at how we brought in community engagement. And when we talk about research, we are using at Google Scholar as well, which doesn't narrow the perspective of looking at research and publications. Yeah? And interestingly, looking at institutional reputation brings up with community engagement and internationalization. Because you talk about student exchange, virtual exchange, we are building up that international reputation. Gaining international reputation for me is extremely important for private universities. Yeah.
Thank you. That's I think that's very good. I mean, community engagement and research using Google Scholars, I think, are important points. And of course, the fact that we've reduced that dreadful reputational survey, which depends so much on history and where you're located in the world, to a minimum of 10%. Okay, let's move on to Winnie and ask Winnie, what would you say, Winnie, are the highlights of the new private university ranking for ASEAN?
One of the most important aspects and highlight for me for this particular private university ranking is it is not another university ranking that enters into the race to the top of research universities. It is a university ranking that for the first time, like you said, Kevin, truly committed in giving due respect to the missions of private university in ASEAN. It is a university ranking designed to inform students and stakeholders in ASEAN. And being a first mover, the private university ranking in ASEAN here, it's actually no small feat, especially when the established rankers have been around for over a decade or two, with many chapters, journal articles, books written, and webinars organized about them. So in a way, for me, seeing it launch today, even though recently in a global conference organized by one of the leading university rankings, people ask if we need another new university ranking. AppliedHE has the courage to give us another one, which is the first in ASEAN, and give due respect, like I said. So in a way, congratulations. But obviously, I say it with a bit of bias being a member of the board. So I'll just end here.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very important point. It's not just another university ranking, because there's never been a university ranking in the world that caters for private universities. And our hope longer term is that we can expand this not just from within ASEAN, although we'll continue to publish that year on year, but also into Asia, and then of course globally, regionally and globally, so that private universities have their opportunity to shine, to use this material in their promotional publicity and so on. And now my apologies to Richard earlier on. Richard is, of course, the editor of the University Ranking Watch blog in Malaysia. Richard, what would you say are the highlights of this particular ranking and its methodology?
Okay, well, I think first of all, it's, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, great. Okay, I think first of all, it's orientated to teaching and learning rather than the research and innovation aspects of a university. The current popular global rankings are heavily or even exclusively devoted to research. And although, okay, this is significant for the vast majority of students, colleges, institutions, it is teaching, especially undergraduate teaching, that is the most important element of what a university does. So I think that the emphasis here on teaching and learning, employability, community engagement is very significant and important addition to the current array of international rankings. And I'd just like to add that I think that the use of Google Scholar, which has coverage of non-English research, is something which is also very important, and it's very welcome.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Richard. I think the other point that I would highlight as being particularly important is that some of the ranking bodies are not quite as transparent as they might be in terms of sharing their data, unless of course you pay a lot of money. We are openly transparent in terms of our data transparency and sharing. So by taking part, you're immediately getting a reward irrespective of your rank, because you're getting data sharing occurring. So I'm very excited about that aspect of the rankings. Well, I want to throw it open, and three members of the panel and myself are here to answer questions. I'll field them to particular members of the panel, but I'd like to throw it open to all of the participants now. And obviously the burning question is, what do you think of the actual ranking? What are our participants thinking about the fact that, congratulations to Bina Nusantara from Jakarta in Indonesia, who topped the poll. They've been around for quite a long time, a family-run university, and produced some excellent students. I've taught some at postgraduate level. And Uniten, a very different creature, from Malaysia, another university I'm very, very familiar with. And then Universitas Islam Indonesia, and then Santo Thomas. So those are the top four. But what do people think generally about the overall results? Are there any questions from the audience, Peter?
No, I don't see any questions from the audience, no raised hands, and nothing in the chat.
I think that's probably a good thing. It probably means that the audience are generally accepting that this is a reasonably fair approach to ranking private university. I would encourage any members, any participants to write to Peter at AppliedHE or to me if they have any questions or queries about the results or about the criteria or the process, because I anticipate this is going to grow. This will grow a great deal over the next year or so. So those of you that are not very familiar with the criteria might want to familiarize yourself so that you can ensure that your university's submission is maximized and your opportunity to shine is maximized. I have to say, I wasn't too surprised by any of the results. They were kind of in line with what I would have expected from my knowledge of some of the universities in this group. So if I just go to Shamim again, Shamim, you're there in Malaysia. What is your view of the way the Malaysian universities have stacked up in terms of this ranking, both overall and in the various criteria? Shamim?
You're muted.
Sorry, my internet is rather wavering at the moment, but I can't speak for everyone, but the overall view is that it's a nice way of looking at ranking differently from those whom I've spoken to, is that if you're talking about giving teaching, you're a private institution, yeah? And
yeah.
Institution cannot, you can't put them together with this well-established, long-established institutions with a long tradition and a long history. And private institutions are set up for a different purpose, actually, providing alternative learning environments different from other setup. And one of the things that's interesting in a very interesting discussion I had with a colleague, a Malaysian colleague, is that you're providing a different kind of environment, and private universities need not be in the league of research the way the other ranking bodies are looking at it. But how do you actually come out with the best teaching and learning programs that ties up very nicely with employability? Meaning, how do you design your program? What?
We're losing you. You're breaking up quite badly, Shamim. So I'm going to move on to Richard. Thank you for those comments. Richard, I hope it's not a Malaysian-wide problem with the internet, but I just want to ask you, what do you think? Do you think that the performance of the Malaysian universities is a reasonable reflection of what you might have expected, or are there some surprises in there?
In general, it seems those that appear are roughly in the order that I would expect, and it also conforms to their position in sort of other large-scale rankings, UniRank and Webometrics. I noticed that there are sort of few high flyers in the Malaysian private sector that are not there, but I presume that that's their choice, and I don't think that would undermine the overall validity. I
can comment on that. I spoke to Multimedia University recently, and they kind of missed it, and they're kicking themselves that they missed it, and they assure me that they will definitely be submitting data for this ranking in its second form next year. A couple of others have indicated the same. I noticed what just to speak for Shamim, Stegi did rather well, coming 9th, and in fact second in Malaysia after Uniten. So congratulations to them. I was also quite impressed with Segi's performance. With Segi's performance in the internationalization and the employability, where they managed to get second place in both of those, which I think is a very impressive result. Okay, Winnie, are there any highlights that you would pick out from the ranking results overall or the countrywide results?
There are two things I like to share. One is absolutely heartwarming to see universities I have the opportunity to partner with in all my different roles at universities, are coming out and doing extremely well and huge congratulations to Venus and all the universities being sort of ranked here. And I think the second highlight for me is the focus back to students, and really looking at what universities are there for students, and then sort of criteria using employability. Obviously, we talked about it for a long, long time, but then how do you measure it? I'm not saying it's perfect for this particular ranking, and no university ranking can claim to be perfect. But again, it's that courage to start looking at how to measure objectively, and then to inform students and put students back in the center of university mission. And I think it's true to what Peter's slide referred to earlier on, what Kevin has said, is shining a light to the private universities. And in this region, where we have some excellent universities that are very committed, very determined, and extremely energetic. Congratulations to everyone across.
Yeah, thank you, Winnie. I think that those are very important points. Can I just ask Peter, so that we don't miss anybody, anyone from our participants want to ask a question? Or
yes. We have 2 hands raised currently. Nguyen Hu Duck, who I will allow to bring, I'll try to bring in first, and Abu Bakr Ahmed, but I'll start with Nguyen Hu Duck.
Yep, we've spoken to him before, that would be lovely.
Nguyen, could you, yes, unmute, go ahead.
Greeting.
Yes, we can hear you.
Did you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to say congratulations for your efforts for supporting the private university in ASEAN to have some recognition, yeah, about the ranking, because we already know for a long time that in the world we have many universities, but if we pay only attention for the one university ranking and so on, so many universities have not have any chance to be in the ranking. Yeah, so your effort is very important. Yeah. So, but yes, in Vietnam, we also just established the UPM rating, and last time several universities in ASEAN have participated. Yes, and for your ASEAN private university ranking, I have 2 questions related on the criteria. Yeah,
right. Yep.
The first of all, in our tradition, for the research criteria, we always use the data from Scopus. Yeah.
Yeah.
But in your case, you use the data in the Google Scholar.
Yes.
So I wonder that if we can clarify all the data for each university and how you can do it. Yes, that's the first question.
Yeah. Sure.
And the second question now is, nowadays, the entrepreneurship and the innovation is a very important aspect for the university. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder that if for the next time you can ask 1 or 2 criteria relating to the innovation and entrepreneurship to rate and to evaluate the successfulness of the university. Okay, so that's my 2 comments for the future of the ASEAN private university ranking. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind comments. The first question, I'm going to go to Richard. The question about why do we use Google Scholar? Richard, perhaps you'd like to answer that, given you mentioned Google Scholar earlier.
Because it's more inclusive than the other databases, Web of Science and Scopus, and it includes a lot of non-English research. I think that's quite important.
Yeah,
there is a situation where the English-speaking world dominates research. To some extent, that's normal and inevitable for historical reasons, but it does form a kind of linguistic imperialism, and it's good to see that some credit is being given for research in languages other than English.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is quite an important.
I'm going to support that. To support it with a private view. My just to show you how inclusive it is. My H index in Scopus is around 14 or 15. My H index in Google Scholar is 29 or 30. And that's simply because it has more scope, more global, coverage. More and more people read it and cite from articles there. And I think also, and I think this is very important, some of the journals that we publish are not necessarily in Scopus at the time we publish, although they may get into Scopus later. And I can honestly say there's a couple of journals I've published in that were certainly tougher to get through the refereeing process, and they're in Google Scholar, but they're not in Scopus. So I don't necessarily see any particular difference in quality in terms of those articles that are included. So I think that's important. I'm going to go to Winnie for the second question, Winnie, which is, should we, as a rankings advisory board, consider innovation, or is it already included in the criteria that we have? What do you think?
Right, this is a test on methodology. I wanted Peter to help me later on. Obviously, I absolutely agree that the more we could measure innovation, the better. I will imagine the challenge has always been, how do you measure objectively that you compare like to like? But in terms of detail, if I can refer to Peter on the methodology, that would be helpful. But as a general sort of observation, I think this is a thing that we could, an aspect that we could absolutely look into and pay attention to.
Well, I can respond specifically on that. I mean, first of all, I would say very good question, but I would say some of that innovation is covered in terms of reputation, but also it would be a fairly simple thing to add a question or two in the student alumni surveys relating to innovation going forward. So we'll take this back into the rankings advisory board, and we'll discuss it. Unless, Shamim, would you like to comment finally on this issue?
I think you could look at innovations in terms of teaching and learning. It's also covered in that, the kind of teaching and learning innovations that you have.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have, Peter, I think, another person with their hand up.
Yeah, I believe we had Abu Bakr Ahmed, but there's a few of them in our list, and he's lowered his hand.
All right. Now maybe his question was answered.
Oh, he raised it for a second. Can you raise it again?
Abu Bakr?
Yes.
Did you give him permission?
Got him.
Okay, Abu Bakr.
It was blinking up and down.
The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I am from Nigeria.
Hi.
And I'm happy to be with you today. Please, my question is it possible for you to extend your ranking system outside Asia to include some public universities from Africa, especially from Nigeria? And if it is possible, what is the criteria or guideline for an institution to submit itself for ranking?
Okay. Thank you, Abu Bakr. Good question. I'm going to pass that on to Peter because that's a company decision. We're the academic advisors, but I know that there is definitely plans to have a ranking of private universities in Africa, but I note that you raised the issue of public universities. So I'm going to hand that over to Peter to answer. Peter.
Yes, that's right. We are actually currently in talks with our agent, who's based in South Africa, for a number of possibilities, and it's essentially we're not a very big company, so it's essentially where do we find the right partners to produce a ranking, because there is cost involved and such things. So we're currently looking at possibly a Pan-African private university ranking and possibly a South African ranking of technical colleges. So that wouldn't be universities, but the technical college side. But that's in a very, very early state. Now, if you say there's a real interest in this in Nigeria, perhaps you are a member of a consortium of public universities in Nigeria or something like that, then please write to us. I can put my email in the chat again, because we'd be happy to talk to you, because especially if we have a group of universities that are keen to get ranked, then we have a basis for doing a ranking. If we just pick one or two universities somewhere in Africa, it can't work. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Peter. And I think, Abu Bakr, I think it'd be a great idea if you were to write to Peter, because you can use your contacts in your region to assist perhaps with setting something like this up. I think it's very, very important. Okay, Peter, are there any other hands raised?
No, not right now.
Okay, how much longer do we have?
We're out of time.
That's why I asked the question. I just want to thank everybody on the panel, Richard, Winnie, Shameen, for all their hard work on the Rankings Advisory Board, and also for joining us on the panel tonight. I'd like to thank our two questioners from the participants, and indeed all the participants who took part. Most of all, I'd like to thank Peter, Mandy, and Simon for all the hard work, particularly I know Peter put in, but the others as well, in calculating and collecting data and so on. I can tell you Peter's aged about 5 years in the last 5 months, prepping that, but I'm sure he'll recover. But it's not an easy job. And just to make one comment on the transparency, Peter constantly came back with raw data to me and other members of the Rankings Advisory Board to check and double check and to ensure that the data had been applied fairly. So in a sense, he allowed us to act as auditors for the final results. And I think that says a great deal about this new ranking. So I commend it to everyone. It will be much bigger next year, trust me. Please use your ranking results to promote your university. People have done exceptionally well, and they should use these results. It's now possible for a private university to be #1 in their country, or #1 in a particular criterion. So, I think that's excellent. So I will now hand back to Peter and Mandy, say thank you to all of you for putting up with our explanations. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask them. Thank you. Peter.
All right. Thank you very much, Kevin. And it's my honor to hand to Mandy for a little presentation at the end.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you everyone for attending the official launch of the first AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN. I hope you've all enjoyed the very interesting and robust discussions. Please allow me to express my deep appreciation to all the members of our very supportive Ranking Advisory Board, led by the chair of the board, Dr. Kevin Downing, who's also the moderator for the panel discussion today. Thanks also to all the enthusiastic panelists, Mrs. Winnie Ely, Professor Dr. Shameen, and Dr. Richard Holmes. And of course, a big thank you to you, the participants. Finally, I'd like to congratulate all the ranked universities again on your great achievements. Thank you for putting your trust in us. While we have come to the end of the ASEAN Private University launch, we have many more events lined up in the very near future. On the 9th of March at 8 p.m. Singapore time, we will be organizing the first episode of season 3. Yes, Squaring the Circle debate is into its 3rd year. And the debate motion is rankings are just beauty contests for vain universities. Very apt after we've just launched a new ranking. As you can see, we have the whole series of debates planned up for the year. So I hope you will join us for as many episodes as possible. Another regular webinar that is alternating monthly with Squaring the Circle debate is the Fireside Chat. And like Squaring the Circle debate, we will be continuing the Fireside Chat series into 2022, also our 3rd year running. As you can see here, we have a whole new series planned for 2022. And the first Fireside Chat is on the 6th of April with the theme, The Future Shape of Sustainable Partnerships. Both our webinars are always on the first Wednesday of the month and always at 8 p.m. Singapore time. So please look out for our emailers. We also organize on behalf of universities, bespoke webinars, where we will undertake all production, branding, and marketing, etc. And here is a good example. We are organizing a series of exciting masterclasses jointly with City University of Hong Kong. Our first one was aired on 15th of December last year. The next one, our second one, is scheduled in 2 days' time on the 25th of February at 4:30 p.m. Hong Kong time. There are 4 masterclasses in total. So do join us for this series of innovative masterclasses produced jointly with City University of Hong Kong. Aside from webinars, AppliedHE does a lot of other things as well. Last year, we launched the world's first composite world university ranking called the Rankometer. This is a new ranking that is based on one single and transparent benchmark. To be precise, the Rankometer is a composite ranking of the world's 5 most influential world university rankings. We will be launching Rankometer 2.0 later this year, so please look out for it. I promise you, you will see some very interesting results. In addition to launching Rankometer last year, we also launched Future, the world's first professional networking platform created specially for the higher education sector. And Future aims to connect everyone from high school to professional career to lifelong learning. For ease of use, Future operates just like any other social media. The difference is Future provides all the relevant stuff that is important to the higher education sector. In short, eventually, Future will include the entire higher education and career experience from leaving high school all the way to retirement. If your alumni are managed right, not only will it increase your employer reputation, it could also lead to lifelong learning in the later years, another avenue to expand your institution's offerings. And we have a solution for it. Recently, we launched a new feature in Future, an alumni engagement and management system with a CRM function, meaning now you can keep track, inform, email your alumni from near and far of news and happenings of your institution anytime, anywhere, all backed up with data and all on one platform. So if you want to build a lasting reputation, whether locally or internationally, with potential students, parents, corporates, and peers, you need to be in constant touch with your alumni. And there is no better strategy than with us on Future, the world's first social media platform for the higher education sector. And the best thing is, it is completely free. So please do take advantage of it. Do also bear in mind that all your reputation building activities done with us will also benefit universities who participate in other rankings. So contact us if you need a demo on how to engage and manage your alumni. Next, we have our e-newsletter, Extra. You can now promote your institution's news to your global target audience. So please send us your extraordinary news and press releases, or you can upload it yourself onto Future. It's yet another complimentary service from AppliedHE, so please take advantage of it. And I'm pleased to say AppliedHE now has 3 rating systems. They serve as benchmarks and marketing tools to your institution's quest for global branding and excellence. We have the all-round job ready rating system to evaluate the quality of teaching and learning and employability of your graduates. An English ready rating to evaluate the quality of English language instruction in non-English speaking countries. It's also a great marketing tool for the recruitment of international students. And the online ready rating, which helps your institution benchmark and promote its online programs and courses. So do reach out to us if you would like to learn more about how these tools can translate into affordable strategies for global branding and marketing of your institution. Now, there are not many activities that focus on students, so this is something new and refreshing. AppliedHE Fireside Chat with students. We are currently running a pilot with an African university. This is a unique webinar format that connects students to international employers, hence allowing students to gain insight into the recruitment process and employer expectations, while providing employers with an opportunity to connect with talented students. This event is promoted globally, and it is a highly visible presentation of an institution's commitment to ensuring its students' international employability. Still focusing on students, the bite-sized online internship is the first of its kind. Like the Fireside Chat with students, we're also running a pilot with an African university. This project involves 3 groups of important stakeholders. They are your students, your university, and the employers. In short, for students, it will help them build a global network even before they graduate and connect with potential employers or industries before deciding on what they really want as a career. For universities, they will enhance the students' uni experience by exposing their students to an international online environment and connecting them to prospective international employers. And for the employers, they will have access to a diverse talent pool of top talent and original ideas. So you can see this new service is very innovative and creative and will definitely bring internships to a new level. For those of you with a deeper interest in the rankings, I highly recommend checking out the AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN Showcase book, which contains ranking tables, an overview of the methodology, and rankings commentary by some of our panelists, Dr. Kevin Downing and Dr. Richard Holmes, as well as Professor Elizabeth Lee. Download it from our rankings page on appliedhe.com. Finally, thank you once again for your interest in attending our AppliedHE Private University Ranking ASEAN launch. We look forward to meeting you at another AppliedHE event soon. Have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you.